Hub Podcast. Let's go.
You're dealing with an expert in guerrilla warfare. With a man who's the best. With guns, with knives, with his bare hands. A man who's been trained to ignore pain, ignore weather, to live off the land. His job was to dispose of enemy personnel. To kill. Period. Win by attrition.
Yeah.
People are like always championing it, like, oh, you don't need the most expensive camera. You can do everything with an Olympus.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to do everything with an Olympus. And then I realized that when it comes to video, the Olympus cameras, they have a timeout. A lot of cameras have a 30-minute timeout.
Oh, okay.
So, like, a lot of guys figured it out the wrong way, too, because they bought the Olympus or bought a Canon. They didn't look into it. And then they're trying to do their video for their podcast, and the camera heats up and then shuts down after 30 minutes.
Oh, yeah.
Like running back and
Trying to fire it back up.
Like, stop and turn the camera back on, right? And Mark,
Yeah.
dude, this doesn't work that way.
I have that same gimbal.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like it. I use it when I'm painting. I time lapse myself.
Yes.
Yeah.
I got those two specifically for having one sit on you, the one on me, but for this one, it's just the editing is so tedious. I'm like, I'm gonna dial it back. I need a full studio team.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's the one thing I learned. You can do it, but it's a lot of work. And with me going to school and then focusing on like every other aspect of my life, I'm just like, okay, there's good and then there's good enough.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. I'm happy though. I think that where I look back where I started, it was like a janky webcam.
Okay.
Like propped up with books.
Yeah.
And just all right, I'm gonna just talk for an hour long with two friends about random stuff. And it always went back to like Star Wars.
Oh, okay. Well, that's funny. It like looped back to everybody's interest. And
there was a little bit of like mental health. And now it's like this podcast that covers like everything in my life that has helped me or has been of value to me. And then like, oh, how can I help other people?
Oh,
like,
okay. Nice.
What can I put out there that's just positive, not negative? And sometimes you gotta like, all right, there is some negative. We get stuff we gotta talk about, but let's talk about it in like a healthy way, not in a way that it's just a negative echo chamber. Because it's like, dude, like you can complain about the world,
yeah,
and then you just depressed for like the next 45 minutes.
Absolutely, get you nowhere. Yeah, and that's something I think as you get older, you start to discover like, okay, why am I spending effort on that?
Yeah, which leads me to our discussion today. Gerry Harrison, welcome to Security Hub Podcast. We've been recording for like 2 minutes.
Oh, we're live. Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You're
stoked to be here.
You're somebody that within this region, you're not just a tattoo artist. You are a amateur mental health provider, because what I found out, a lot of reason why guys go to see you specifically, it's like I just go to Gerry's and I just listen to somebody talk that gives me perspective, and I can just be myself and have a really good time. Kind of get things off my chest. So guys continue to go back to you because they're like, yeah, he's kind of like, a soldier whisperer without even knowing it.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Wow, that's really like cool to hear,
Yeah, dude.
And when I talk to people like my clients, like you're talking about, I always do, anybody in life, I always try to like, whenever they say something to me, I try to be like, how can I give somebody a perspective? I do that with my son, constantly. Like, look at it from this person, like you're not looking at it.
Yeah.
And then I think I try to do that to myself my whole life. So
yeah,
I feel like it helped me. So that's why I always end up, I guess preaching in that manner is that, if that's the right word to use on how it comes across. But that's the best way I feel like I deliver, something I can think about.
Yeah. It comes off natural. You're not somebody that, and it's funny because I think every culture has their like Yeah, I'm not going to go see a therapist, but I got a barber. And when I go there, I can get some perspective on the world and somebody else's opinion on things that are going on around me that helps me balance out what I feel about my immediate area.
Yeah.
And I think that's what that's why I instantly was like, dude, that's the guy I'm going to go get a tattoo from. Because it's not just I'm sitting there getting an awesome piece of artwork, but I'm engaging with somebody outside of my normal day-to-day environment. And we don't do that enough these days. We don't get that outside perspective. I can hang out with military people all day long and only get one view of the world.
Yeah.
And
true.
like that's of no benefit to me. But if I'm able to make a friend with somebody that's from a different world, a different culture, and then I can see their perspective and see their views on things, I'm like, oh, now I'm a little more well-rounded.
Yeah.
I
can appreciate that.
And that's like what drew me to your tattoo shop. It was a mix of people that weren't just the same people, weren't the same person cut from the same cloth. Everybody was different and everybody was just really chill.
Yeah. That's the environment that we always like, kind of curated, with Gerry. My wife she, came into it owning a hair salon. So she came into that world. It was a new type of, environment to work in. And the first couple of years, she, like, as you know, worked at the front of the shop because we were like getting it off the ground. Now it's great that it kind of just runs, it's self-sustaining.
Yeah.
We've got the right people in there, but we were always on the harmony of the shop was our first and foremost before anything else.
Yeah. You did it right. There's a lot of places you can go into, whether it's a tattoo shop or a hardware store. And if the people aren't kind, aren't generous, aren't inviting, it's just like, why am I even here?
Yeah.
Like, especially with something as intimate as getting a piece of artwork on you. Like that in and of itself is like a very vulnerable thing. Like you're trying to express, or if you're like me, where you can't even express it verbally. Like I've always been like, I kind of have this idea. I want to be like a robot from the 1950s.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're just like, okay, I can run with that. And that's one thing with that, that drew me to, I think, tattooing in the beginning, because I always like to be creative. I always like painting and drawing. I went to school for graphic arts, but I found that I didn't like commercial arts. There was to designing like, a magazine layout or something. It just didn't give me the fulfillment that it gives other people.
Yeah.
There's other people that just love that, but I was kind of like, I felt, almost like it was like production work to me, and not to discredit it, but that's how I felt. And so when I got into tattooing, it was something that I felt like I was never going to like totally know it.
Yeah.
And so I felt like I could always learn something. And so when over the, almost 23 years now of people wanting to get work from me, is that there's always something new coming in and they're presenting just their idea verbally.
Yeah.
And then it's a new challenge for me. Like, how can I depict that? And I would always kind of just, I guess, my perspective of how I sold myself, because I'm selling my service of what I create, was that, okay, I'm gonna take their idea and I can sell them what I will do best.
Yeah.
If that doesn't hit the mark, then I might not be the artist for them in that particular venture. But most of the time I am. And a lot of it I think goes back to, like you described, of like me as a person. I get a lot of that as well.
Yeah.
People say that they come back to me just because I just like the whole experience.
Oh, 100%. Like I remember there's few pieces I have on my body that weren't done by you originally that I was completely like, dude, like I think the factor in getting them redone was like, I had no connection to the artwork. There's nothing. I got in a time period where I wasn't like, it was just a lost kid, not finding my own spot in life. And then I'm like, you know what? Like now I really have something I want to add to this. Like, and I don't want just any other artist to do it. I want somebody to have a connection. I think that for a lot of people that, go out there and look for artwork, they tend to stay loyal to that one person or that shop because of that experience. At least from talking to people that I know, it's because it's like, man, once you find your crew of people that you enjoy being there, because you're going to be there for a couple hours.
Yeah. At minimum, you're there at least a couple hours for the whole
Yeah.
know.
But I want to ask you, so you started out in graphic design.
Mhm.
How did that shift come where you're like, man, I'm going to take this and now I'm going to put it on human flesh?
Well, honestly, got out of high school. I grew up here in Fort Walton, and
Yeah.
I was going to what's now the college in Niceville, but it was a community college at the time. And I wanted to do something art related. I was like, and I remember saying, my parents, and I actually even wrote in my high school, like, where are you going to be in 30 years? And I was like, I'm going to be a painter. I'm going to have stuff in galleries and museums. And that was like, I had no idea how I would make that happen.
Yeah.
Or even if there was a direction. And growing up here in a small town, there wasn't even like a perspective in front of me of like, well, here's how you could do that.
Yeah.
So I didn't know at anything. And my mom was flipping through the curriculum of the college because I was like, well, maybe I'll go take some art classes and kind of just, see where it takes me just to get my momentum going.
Yeah.
And she's like, well, you could go into graphic arts, and she was looking at it more in the perspective of like, here's a job that you could get, be creative, but you have a place you show up to, and there's work there. So it continually keeps you, living and supporting yourself. So I was like, oh, that sounds interesting. So I got into that. And then my second semester, I got into the art department because I was taking some drawing classes as well. I was learning how to like doing like, portraits of faces, okay, I just want to build my foundation more than I had in high school, art classes. And the art teacher there, who was kind of like the building, he was like in charge of the building. He was the main art teacher in that one. So kept seeing this guy come in, and like going and making mud and, loading the kiln up. And then I was kind of like, well, who is that guy? Because he was like my age.
Yeah.
And and he's like, oh, that's my assistant. And I was like, oh, that's a job, and he's like, and he goes, and it occurred because after one day in my drawing class, my teacher needed a ride into Fort Walton to pick his car up from the auto shop. And he's like, can anyone offer me a ride? I'll give you some gas money. And I was done after that class.
Yeah.
Not one person like raised their hand. I'll give you a ride, So I started talking to him on the drive, and that's how I found out who that person was. And so I asked him like, about it. And he goes, oh, do you want the job? And I said, I was like, yeah. And he says, yeah, this is his last semester. So he's going off to, a university now. So he goes, go fill out the paperwork and I'll tell him I want you. And he goes, it doesn't matter who else fills out paperwork because I can pick them if I want.
Nice.
So then I started working in the art department with him, and I was like loading the kilns up, mixing glazes, taking all these powder and chemical measurements and, all kinds of stuff that, I had no idea about it, and learned how to, was taking dry, dirt and turning it into workable clay that, students were using in their classes. And so I started just kind of hanging out in that building more.
Yeah.
More so. And I kicked around several ideas, like, well, maybe I could become an art teacher. Maybe I could, trying to figure out like, what can I do with myself, being creative, but I still need to support myself.
Yeah.
And, not knowing how to make that step. So then I ended up getting all the way to where actually I only needed like one class. I failed like an English class. And then I was kind of over school at the moment. And so I just dropped out. I just was like, I don't even want to do this. And then my counselor, which I don't even remember who they were, but I remember sitting in their office and they're like, well, you only have one more semester left. I said, yeah, but I've already been here like 2 semesters longer. So I felt like I was like spinning my wheels in life because I was young, and thinking like, oh, another semester is going to kill me, which it wouldn't have,
This will end my life.
Yeah. Like I'm wasting my years, type of thing. And so I quit, and I just kind of, from that moment, just kind of bounced around from job to job, and always kind of went to whatever paid more money, and then I became a screen printer when I lived in Denver up there.
Oh, that's right. You were in Denver for a little bit.
Yeah. So I ended up moving there because my best friend had moved up there, and it was the winter around here. And he was like, move up here. There's plenty of jobs. So I was like, I'll try something new. So I moved up there, and then I was a screen printer, did production work on like metal instrument panels. I printed stuff that went on rockets.
Nice.
Printed things that went on like aircraft carriers. Like I did surgical units, like instrument panels on metal, and sometimes it was just one part.
Yeah.
And I had to like create a whole screen just to do this one squeegee pull, and then okay, that one's done.
Dude, that's crazy because when I was a young kid, straight out of like, because I enlisted, the first thing I did was enlist in the National Guard when I left home. I ran away from home early, like 17, 18, and joined the Guard. And I was doing like guard drills as a senior in high school.
Oh, okay.
And then like, it was like, I'm going to go to school. They're going to pay for everything. Come to find out, you don't make shit and you still have to find a different job. So I got a job doing manufacturing in plastics and magnesium production. And I was making parts for L3 and the radios that I would eventually be carrying and working with in Iraq.
Oh, how weird. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And like I always remember just how of a shitty job I did at QA QC inspection and be like, I'm never going to suffer the consequences of this.
Yeah. And then you're like, oh, now I'm using this equipment.
Little did I know.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah. Yeah. I was like, I ended up with just a plethora of things that I really would not have thought were actually screen printed.
Yeah.
And I'd screen printed a couple of times in college in classes. It was like part of the like, oh, we're going to do some screen printing this semester. And I'd already done that textile wise.
Yeah.
So I kind of had an understanding of it. And then I worked with just me and one other guy, and did pieces for telescopes. And sometimes I would go to this one paint shop, and it was like a warehouse that was powder coated stuff.
Nice.
And I would go over there and I would have to bring my screen, and they had a table there that they stored in the corner for us. And I literally would set up in the middle of this warehouse and fill pallets, like sometimes 300 to 500 pieces. And I would like walk them into an oven that was like you could drive a car into to like bake the ink.
Yeah.
And I can remember like walking into the oven, like, this is so weird that I'm inside an oven, like, and this is my job, and so then I just having that job basically is what I was doing. I ended up going to a different company doing the same thing.
Yeah.
Doing production parts. It was all like flat work. They referred to it. It was never textile work that I screen printed. And I hung out with a group of, gearheads that were all into Volkswagens.
Yeah.
And I had a Volkswagen at the time. And the guy who ended up having like a garage that kind of became our clubhouse, we'd always just hang out there. And he basically just did anything and everything for a car on a Volkswagen. All air cooled. And he came in one day and he had like a new tattoo on his stomach. He'd gotten like flames on his stomach or something, something very, 90s, and
what's the name of that band? God.
and so it was like just right around his belt button, and then I was like, oh, where'd you get that? And he's like,
the tribal flames.
And he's like, oh, so-and-so did it, and I didn't know he tattooed. Because I knew he had a different job, and he was part of the kind of the group that we would get together and, talk about what we were going to do to cars, one day. And he's like, oh yeah, he tattoos at his house. It's just kind of a hobby. So I was like, oh wow. So the next time I saw him, I basically just was talking to him. Oh, I didn't know you tattooed. I was like, that's pretty cool. I've always been interested in that. And he's like, really? You want to come over tomorrow? I'm tattooing, this one guy that I knew because of him and this younger guy. And I was like, yeah, I'll come check it out. So I went over there and literally was like watching him, set up, get, all his stuff, like asking, well, why are you doing that? What is that you're doing? Like, oh, why do you put that there? And, and then finally, and then he started tattooing, and we were literally set up like on his kitchen table, is where he was set up in. It was like an open living room. So that like the TV was right over there, the couch, and this was the kitchen table. He's tattooing some, I want to say he was doing like an Iron Maiden, piece or something on the kid's forearm, and laying out so many lines in the tattoo, and I'm just like, oh, wow, how do you see what you're doing? Pretty common questions that my clients ask. And so finally he was like, do you want to give it a try? He goes, it might answer some of your questions better than me. And because he didn't, by no means did he consider himself an expert. It was just like, there's only so much I can tell you because I just do this as a hobby. And he really didn't have a desire to like do it for a living either. He just enjoyed, just like
Yeah.
doing it. And so I was like, yeah. So, put some gloves on, and then,
Right in the spot.
yeah, right on the spot. Just sat down. The guy getting tattooed did not seem to care that I had never done. And he was like, "Yeah, right on, man. Sit down, and give it a try." And I'm all like, "Oh, okay, yeah, it's on now."
It's the most Colorado guy thing ever.
Like, okay, we're doing this.
Hell yeah, dude.
And so I drew like maybe like 6 or a dozen lines on it. And then I kind of started to feel like kind of nervous, like, oh, okay, maybe I should step back, and then I, was like, wow. And then, but literally after I drew like maybe the second or third line, it was like my brain just went off and I was like, I have to know how to do this.
That was the moment.
And I didn't even think I was going to do it for a living. I just was like, I always wanted to be creative. And I was like, it opened up that door, and gave me like wow, I could do this, but I don't feel like I'd ever like I say, learn it all.
Yeah.
So I went and bought magazines, and he had told me basically like, oh, well, you can order some equipment. The back of every tattoo magazine at that time was Spalding and Rogers, so they bought the back page every issue, so that was advertisement, which a lot of artists have, been like, they'll like bag on the company at the same time. They'll be like, they got me started, because, because they were the only one at that time that sold to the general public.
Yeah.
And, nobody else, you couldn't call a company. They would just hang up on you, if you were trying to like order equipment. And so, that was like money order days. So I had to like
check your money order.
Yeah. I had to literally like mail a letter to buy a catalog. And then mail that letter and then wait for the catalog to show up. And then, and he told me, buy this, this, and this. And I bought a machine off of him and a power supply that somebody had made,
nice.
Which was very common at that time, people making their own power supplies.
Yeah.
There wasn't like an abundance of supplies still, even though tattooing, wasn't like super young at that time. There was a limited amount of supplies you could buy, a limited amount of inks companies out there, needles, everything. Yeah. And so I, filled out my little form, mailed it off. And I think it was like 4 to 6 weeks later, finally stuff shows up, and then I tattooed like a friend of mine in our living room. I tattooed another friend. I had moved up to Breckenridge at that point. Yeah. And another friend of mine had maybe done like, I think at that time I hadn't done anything, and I moved up to Breckenridge, and one of my friends came up to visit me for the weekend. And he's like, "So, do you want to fix that tattoo on my back?" And I was all like, "Whoa, are you serious?" I'd been practicing on oranges and trying to read magazines and get information, but it was mostly just interviews. It wasn't like no one gave out information.
Yeah.
Then there was nobody trying to like gain notoriety by telling the world how to do something they were doing. It was very, I guess, close guarded, secrecy of like, even like
dark arts,
even like where you would get your equipment. People wouldn't talk about that, like, oh, that's a cool machine, where did you get that? They wouldn't even divulge that.
Really?
Yeah. Because it was kind of like, well, then you're just going to have as good a stuff as me.
Oh.
And then that's going to make you my competition. Yeah. So it wasn't, like totally open.
Yeah.
There's a bit of that to the world where people do communicate with each other, but
when I look into tattooing, it's like there's no institute of tattooing. There's no institute of the fine arts of tattooing where you can go in, sit down, and pay your semester fees. Like it's always seen as the master and the apprentice.
Yeah.
Like, I'm apprenticing at this shop.
Yeah.
It's very much like that. It's like one of the closest thing. Here we go, Star Wars. Here it goes back.
Closest thing to that. Yeah. Yeah. You can relate it. You can give it any analogy that, lays off of it. But and that was it. It was, and I did that for like almost like about 1.5 years, 2 years, I feel like. I'm like, I don't really remember the exact timeline. But I mean, I did my first tattoo in like, I think it was 98 or, and then it wasn't until like, 01 that I actually like got my foot in the door. And I kind of would off and on do it while I was trying to like find literature And because I had this perspective that many people were, oh, you can tattoo. Oh, I want to get this.
Yeah.
And it was just some grand scheme. And I'm like, well, okay, let's hold back because I don't even know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to like just totally mark someone up and it not be, at least something that they were going to live with.
Yeah.
And so I went and asked the shops. There were 2 in Summit County at the time. I went and asked both of them, got denied. And I feel like that was maybe like 99. I had done, that, or maybe 2000 or whatever. And I had started, I was driving the transit bus up there.
Yeah.
And then I went, it was about a year had passed. Maybe it was a little longer. I was like, I'm going to go ask again.
Yeah.
And then, so, went into one shop, got denied again, went into the other one that was actually like down the street from where I lived because I was on Main Street, Breckenridge. So I could walk to it. And I just went in on the right day. This guy named Chris, he actually lives back in Summit County tattooing again.
Nice.
And he was tattooing there. The owner was out and he's basically I had this little book of like a dozen tattoos that I had done on friends. And I had a little box of needles that I had made.
Yeah.
And he looked at all of it and was like, well, these are pretty good, and he goes, the owner might honestly be interested in, apprenticing you. He goes, I just finished my apprenticeship with him and he's, it's hard to find artists up here in the mountains. So he's like, he's all about teaching somebody. So he said, come back, and like 4:00 today, he should be back in town. So I went back and he chatted with me and he was really impressed mostly with the needles I made versus my tattoos or anything. He was like, how did you learn how to do this? And at that time you could order a needle kit from Spalding. So I ordered that and basically ordered some pre-mades, which were at that time like $1 or more per just single needle. Like, so, and they sold them by boxes of 50. Yeah. So it wasn't like you could go buy, a large amount of pre-mades. They were still very expensive. So most people made their needles and they bought loose ones. They grouped them how they wanted them. And everybody was very specific kind of grouping. You kind of could create your own paintbrush, so to speak.
I had no idea
on how to do that. So I bought, and ones that were already made, bought a bunch of materials, and then I just reverse engineered it.
Holy shit.
In my own head, it was, okay, this is what they did. This is this needle. This is the jig for that needle. And I would just look back and forth and I'd just make them over and over and over and solder. And I had never really soldered much of anything at that time. So, and then the needles, the pre-mades one, they were like perfect.
Yeah.
So I was trying to make them perfect. Because that's the way I thought it was supposed to be. And he looked at me and told me, he's like, I'll be honest, these needles look better than the ones I make. He goes, I'm not even this concerned with how perfect the solder is. He goes, because I'm only using it for one tattoo and I'm getting rid of it. And he goes, as long as it's on there.
Yeah.
And so he was kind of excited that at that moment, maybe he wasn't gonna have to make needles anymore because that was one of my tasks. So I would sit down, I'd go in and I would make him and the other guy needles for the week. And I would kind of overstock. So I was like, okay, if I'm gonna sit down and do it, I just would figure out like I should make like 2-3 weeks worth at a time.
Damn.
So I could kind of keep up on it. And then I carried that probably the first maybe like 4 years. I kept making them. And then at one point, all of a sudden, the prices started dropping on pre-mades.
Oh.
And then there was pre-mades. Then you were trying to find a pre-made that looked like what you had made before.
Yeah.
Well, this is how I make that needle, but nobody else makes it that way. So, so he was like,
there's so many layers to this. It's not just being an artist. You're like an engineer.
Yeah. And it is. Yeah. So a lot of it, going through an apprenticeship was with Sierra Colt, and he owns a shop in San Diego now. Mm-hmm. And he basically, which is Bearcat Tattoo Gallery down in Little Italy area. And I think he was like, I don't know, like 6 years into tattooing. So, and he had started very young, and then, already owned his own business. So he was like, he's a really super driven person. So it was really cool to learn from him. And he was also very savvy of the business side of things. And he approached it differently with more of he always called it the bedside manner. He goes, like a doctor, he goes, that person, like you say, they're sitting in your chair for hours.
Yeah.
He goes, so there has to be a comfort there too. It can't just be sit down and now I'm going to work. And then because it makes the person uneasy, and then
Yeah.
and that projects into you as an energy, and then you're not
Yeah.
being able to do as good a work. There's that exchange going on, so you're kind of like, okay, this person's not even like sitting here now, I'm really trying to get this, and they're uncomfortable, and this is painful, and so it starts to make you kind of think,
Yeah.
well, now I just need to make this done, so there's the whole experience can be over.
Yeah.
But you're trying to be, no, I need to make it a good piece.
Yeah.
So he was very much on that, like teaching me like the whole like start to finish. Just talking to the person was a huge step that he instructed on. Just even before they even maybe sit down, you might not even tattoo them that day, but just the talking to them. Then he taught me how to make needles. He, taught me some basic principles of how my machine, why my machine did what it did. Opened up the door.
So much
like,
to it.
Like, here's a couple companies you can order from now that you're at a shop, and then he's like, and then he would have to call and like, hey, this person's my apprentice.
Really?
Yeah. And then basically like, here's the shop number. And you would call from the shop phone, it was pre-cell phone.
Yeah.
So not everybody had direct access to it. So you would call from that shop phone, and, everything would get shipped to the shop. So, and then he basically just he was very good at like teaching me all the layers of it.
Yeah.
Then he went, it's like, okay, you gotta go to the store and get a ledger book.
Yep.
And then I literally wrote down like every single tattoo that I did, how much it was, if I got a tip on it.
Yeah.
And then the date. And then that was like, here's my income book.
Yep.
And then he's like, okay, now this is your other book for expenses. And he taught me how to track.
Yeah.
And keep track of that. He's like, because one day you're going to want to buy a house, and you're going to, he had forethought of that, where a lot of people don't teach that to anyone. It's like, I'm going to teach you how to make a living, but I didn't teach you how to actually like do something in the world with that, revenue, then you kind of set up somebody up to fail.
Absolutely.
So he was really setting me up to succeed as far as like, this is where it can take you.
Yeah.
You got to get an apartment. You got to show income, like walk in, here's my ledger, I got our first home loan to get a house, with Terry and I, was with handwritten ledgers.
Yeah.
She's like, oh, I need your P&Ls. I need this. And I walked in with 2 books, and I said, here is everything. I don't have anything as far as a P&L. I hand ledger everything.
Yeah.
And so she flipped through all of it, made copies of some pages, and then it went right through because it was real thorough.
Yeah.
So they, that
you're not just learning how to do art, you're learning how to be a business owner.
Yeah.
From somebody that actually cares. That's true mentorship. That's something that I talk about on this platform a lot. Like when you take somebody in to teach them your profession, your job, it's more than just the tasks of that 9 to 5 coming in and doing that work. You're helping a young person understand what it means to be an adult, what it means to take on and take ownership of your craft, all aspects of it.
Yeah.
Like that's phenomenal.
Yeah. And he taught me that. It was like, and the same thing I taught, my apprentice when I taught Dylan at the shop I was like, you are, the commodity.
Yeah.
You're selling yourself
in
all aspects. It's like who you are as a person, what you're, giving them as a service, and the whole experience is what you're selling.
Yeah.
So
that's so true.
And then being able to like take that into a real world application if you need.
Yeah.
How
many apprentices have you had?
I've had one that made it.
Nice.
I guess I could leave it at that. Because I don't need to bag on anybody. Various people didn't make it because I didn't have the seriousness or the dedication that I thought that I put into it myself.
Yep.
That I wanted to see someone else put into it. So
well, and I would imagine it takes. You take all of your experience of all the individuals that poured themselves into you, into helping you succeed. And it's like, okay, there's that lineage. There's a direct line of everybody that helped me. Like, I'm not going to half-ass this. And the person I choose to like pour into, like, I want them to be somebody that's going to go into this.
Yeah.
And like be dedicated to it. Is I think right now there's a shift, and it's very much like, well, I can do this. Once it gets hard, it's like, I don't want to do it anymore. I'll shift. I'll pivot to something else. I'll pivot to something else, and you're just constantly pivoting. And it's like, dude, like, take time, really analyze what you're passionate about. Because if you don't, you're going to constantly pick something up, drop it, pick something up, drop it, and quit and quit and quit, and never stay into something because you're just so wishy-washy. Figure out what you're passionate about, what your true purpose and passions are, and like go after them and stay committed, because it's the challenges. That's what you really want. Like, you want something that's challenging.
Yeah.
It's
ready to grow.
It's anything that's easy.
Yeah.
It's like, it's easy to get a paycheck. It's easy to get income from a 9 to 5, but you're not going to be happy with it. And then you're going to find ways to seek out comfort and seek out pleasure. And it's like, at the end of the day, like, you're constantly complaining about your job, like, that sucks.
Yeah.
Like, that's not a good life. You're going to have to work. We all have to work. We all have to be engaged in something.
Yeah.
Make sure it's something you're passionate about. And
it is true. And that's when I got into tattooing. It was my mentor when he was like interviewing me, I guess.
Yeah.
Would have been what was going down when we were having the conversation is he's like, why do you want to, tattoo? And then I said, he's like, he goes, a lot of people, you can make a good living, doing it, and I said, I just want to like going to work.
Yeah.
And I said, I already have a job that pays well. And I said, and it has benefits. It has a pension. I said, it has all the things that you're supposed to look for in a job. I said, but I drive around in circles all day long. And I said, I don't get anything out of it. So that was the idea of like, when I started tattooing, it gave me that direction of like something that I enjoyed getting up and going to. I didn't feel like I was working, so to speak.
And it comes across every time you step into your shop and you engage anybody that walks in there. I know it. Like, I can't imagine anybody walking into your tattoo shop and being like, oh, this guy hates what he does. Like, every time you walk in there.
Yeah.
And I've had moments where it's like, man, like, it's been a really shitty day. You walk in and the atmosphere is so different. It's you can't help but to be lighter and to feel better walking in and be stoked. Like, yeah, you're going to get a tattoo. Like, but you're there and you see the excitement, you see the live, like, you have a spirit and an ability to engage with people that it's not common. And it's becoming more of a rarity these days. Like, just be able to like walk in and disarm somebody from having a really bad day. It's just like,
thank you.
Oh shit. Like, this is going to be great.
Thank you. That means a lot.
Yeah. It's like, I've been there and I've seen other customers come in when you've been like, just manning the shop on yourself, working on me. And you can tell somebody's having like kind of a weird day. And it's just like the shift happens instantly. And it's just like, hey, what's up? How's it going, man? And they're like, oh, hey, like thinking about getting X, Y, and Z. I even saw it with a friend of mine that was coming into town to check in. I remember seeing him come in the door, and he was, traveling out of state, coming back, having a horrible day because he's here for a horrible situation. But he talks to you for like a few seconds, and before we say goodbye as he's leaving the shop, completely different state of mind, completely different. Nice. I'm like, dude, like, that's the Gerry effect. And I think there's tons of people out there that have that. And I think we can all tap into that if we're happy with what we're doing in our day-to-day life. Like, anybody that goes to work and they're like, fuck, I hate my job. I hate what is that office space scenario.
Yeah.
Where
And I was never cut for that.
Yeah.
So, I knew I would never succeed in that world, but it took me a while to find like a window that was like where I could go and do that.
Yeah. And I think being brave enough to seek that out, to take the no's and continue driving through. Cause it's like, it wasn't easy. It wasn't something that was like, yeah, come in, I'm going to show you everything. It's like, you have to, bounce back, resilience. Like, hey, this guy said no this time.
Yeah.
What about tomorrow? What about the next day?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I was like, okay, give it another go. And then, and then it just, the opportunity of, the door opened.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. And while I was apprenticing, I actually was still driving the transit bus.
Yeah.
And he's told me, because he understood I needed to pay my bills. And he's like, you need to be here at least 3 days a week minimum.
Yeah.
You know, and I was like, well, that's perfect. I said, I work 4 10s driving a bus.
Yeah.
So I'll just come here on my days off. And so every day I did something. I got up and went somewhere to work. You know, what my apprentice wasn't paying anything. It's like going to school.
Yeah.
You don't get paid to go to class. You know, so I did that, and I had several people like at the bus depot when I'd be over there working a day. They're like, so I heard that you're doing this. I'm like, yeah, you know, yeah. I'm just, don't know. When do you do that? I'm like, on my days off. Well, when do you have days off? I said, well, I don't. You know, and you know, and a lot of them I couldn't fathom the idea that I had given up whatever free time.
Yeah.
You know, that I had, for lack of a better word. You know, I don't think there is any free time. It's just time. You know, it's how we use it.
Yeah.
And so they were like, oh, and I don't think I could do that. I was like, okay, well then, you know, I guess I do, because I know this isn't going to be forever. You know, it may be for a year, maybe for 2 years, but I know I can make it to the end of that.
Yeah.
You know, that was kind of the first time I guess I actually forward thought in my life.
Yeah.
You know, and I was in my like later 20s. You know, you know, like, you know,
It's
like,
pretty wise.
you know, like, oh, I can think this, you know, but, you know, and I see people, you know, in life that like have that forward thought earlier than I did. And I'm like, that's awesome that they see that, you know? And so that kind of was a turning point, you know, and it opened the door, you know, for me to be creative, like going to work, find that spot that I was kind of like trying to find out of high school. How can I be creative and support myself?
Yeah.
You know, so I did that for, you know, quite a while. And then when it ended up after I had met Terry and we came here to, you know, she fell in love with this area and really wanted to just slow our life down.
Yeah.
Compared to Southern California, where we were just trying to keep up, you know, the overhead was too much. And so we decided to kind of reboot our life, you know, came here, and then it segued into us, you know, opening a shop.
Yep.
You know, we had our ups and downs with, you know, before it all happened, you know, and then, but that's probably another podcast, you know? going into that story. But, you know, then one day she was literally just like, you know, you need to have your own shop.
Yeah.
You know, and I was like, and I was working downtown, and I was really working mostly by appointment. You know, I very rarely took walk-ins, and I was working in a street shop.
Yep.
You know, so it was not common for an artist to just be booked in a street shop, because you generally didn't want to book yourself because you wanted to keep getting that walk-in clientele.
Yeah.
And I just enjoyed the engagement with people. So I liked having that kind of like, you know, and then plus I also knew that like I had, you know, more of a steady revenue because I was supporting a family. Like, okay, I have this many weeks of work ahead of me coming in. And so I was kind of like, oh, we can't afford that. We got to put together this much money if we decide to take that leap and this and that. And she's like, no, we can, you know, no, you need your own shop. And so finally I was just kind of, I was like, you know what, just do it. You know, if you think it can happen, I was like, just don't tell me about it, because I don't think, you know, I was like, the anxiety of it.
Yeah.
You know, I have anxiety I battle with in my life. And so, and then plus I was working for somebody. So I didn't, you know, feel like, okay, I feel like maybe am I undercutting this person?
Yep.
You know, that loyalty of like, this person gave me a job.
Yep.
You know, and so I was like, just, if you think it can happen, then, you know, go ahead and make it happen.
That loyalty piece gets a lot of us.
Yeah. And so, and it was time for me to like segue on anyway. So, and then so finally one day she's like, oh, you know, this building's available and there's a lease ready to sign. So, and I was like, oh, well, we don't have any money. What do you mean? Yeah. She goes, oh, we're fine. We have this credit card. And so we're going to do it. You're going to be fine. You're going to be fine. Trust me. Yeah. And so I was like, okay. So it took me like a few days to kind of build up the courage to basically tell the owner that I was working for, like, I'm going to quit and I'm going to go open up in the same town as you, you know, which is very frowned upon, you know, in the world. So I went to him and I sat down and I said, look, this is what I'm going to do. I said, if you want me to quit today, I get it. I said, but I have 2 weeks of appointments on my books. If you'd like me to make you some more money, then I'll stick around and do that. And he was like, well, I'd be foolish to tell you to not make me some more money. And, and I was like, okay, and he always liked me because I was, very much there. I just came to work. I didn't have any other, agenda going on. Just came in, I worked, did a good job. People, liked me and, engaged with my clients. Right. And then he was like, man, I bet this was a really hard conversation to have. And I said, yeah, it was, I said, because I didn't want to feel like I was doing, undercutting you or doing this to you. And he says, I can get that. He goes, well, I respect that you came to me the way you did. And he talked about people quitting and like basically like him going home for the day and coming back and their station was empty in the past, and like getting a key in the mail, and like no explanation of just like anything happening. And he goes, so he really liked that I just openly was like, I'm not gonna sugarcoat this or lie to you. I'm just going to tell you what I'm doing. He asked me, well, who are you taking with you? I said, no one. I was like, I'm just going to go work so that if I need a day off from my son's school, I can take it. If we want to go out of town as a family, we can make that happen. And then I basically just left for creating my own space to work in. And when I started telling clients, man, everybody was just super pumped for me. And I had people coming by, like a few people showing up and actually like helping me do stuff. Terry and I were in there working on it, doing it all ourselves.
It's like my flag just filled in.
and they're all like, like, oh, I'll help you paint this wall. I'll help you do that while they're dropping a deposit to make an appointment, in the middle of rubble.
Yeah.
And then there was one guy in town and he had left the shop he was at. And he had met me years ago and always remembered that he liked me as a person, was like, oh, that guy's opening a shop. So he showed up and was like, hey, I'd like to work with you.
Yeah.
And so, like I said, we weren't even planning. So then we're like, okay, well, we got to build another station. So at that moment, okay, now we need 2 spaces.
Yeah.
And so we built out the 2 and he worked with us for a while and he ended up, going about and doing his own thing eventually, going his way. And then that's when it just kind of evolved into what it is. We met Dylan at he actually came to like the grand opening, but I didn't know him then. And he had later told me that he had come to try to talk to me about apprenticing. And I had somebody that I was like helping out at the time who, came over and had worked a counter at a previous place that I worked at. And so he kind of thought, oh, well, he's probably not doing anything.
Yeah.
And then it wasn't until later in that year that I met his brother.
Yeah.
His brother talked him up and Terry was like, oh, you gotta teach this guy.
Yeah.
And so it was her that really, pushed me. I mean, honestly, like a lot of the forward steps, the majority of them, Terry pushed me into.
Yeah. Well, that's the beauty of having a partner in crime, having a wife. Like I'm the same way. We deal with a lot of self-doubt.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
we deal with a lot of like, I don't know if I can do this. Making that lateral, like same with me, like choosing to put my health and my family first. That was a big thing. That was a really big thing. And that's a scary thing to make that lateral move. And they're like, okay, like, am I going to go off on my own? Can I succeed on my own? And every veteran has that moment. Every working civilian has that moment. I've got a great friend, never served a day in his life, was very successful in the job he had. He loved what he was doing, but he had a bigger calling, had a bigger passion for something else. And if it wasn't for his wife saying like, hey, you can do this, in that outside perspective from the most important person in your life, your spouse, like, that's huge.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. She's always been there for me to like push me out of my comfort zone.
Yeah.
She's like, no, go and do this, no, take this person on. It's going to work. It's going to be good for you. And it was good for me as, a tattooer and great for him because he found a direction in life that he enjoys. And then, just investing in someone, having seen that return, it's, kind of healthy in itself. And then as the years passed on of, the shop, with us working and having artists come and go and, trying to fit that harmony that we always, not everybody matched up. So, people ended up, moving on. And then, I would always, I would go back to like painting which I'm doing more of now. And I would like paint. Everything was always like tattoo related.
Yeah.
You know, like when I would paint, I'd sit down and paint, for the idea that maybe somebody, wanted it, to do as a tattoo. And I always painted all the way back as a teenager. I was into painting, and I used to try to paint album art, or like, oh, that's a cool picture or a photograph, or just try to paint it just for the enjoyment. I just love that. And like I said in high school, where I was like, I'm going to be a painter. And I had no idea I could make that happen. And so, but I was like, it just felt like it was going, that's what I should be doing.
Yeah.
So I just naturally said it. And so I would talk about that. And then Terry was like, well, why don't you paint then? So she's like, you need to do that. She's like, go after it. And so once again, she like pushed me, out of, my comfort zone again. And here I've been tattooing for so long, like, okay, this is my definition of who I am. And, so I was kind of in that lane and was kind of like, okay, well, now I can step out of it.
Yep.
So, but I also was at a point in my career where I felt established to where there was forward momentum that kept going. And it allowed me to like sit back and kind of like slow down a little bit and kind of take notice of, what was happening. Instead of feeling like I'm trying to work forward into something constantly, starting to enjoy the moment. So it opened up that window to like, okay, do this. And the building next to us that was next to our shop we were renting became available. And it was the same owner that owned both buildings. So Terry went over there and talked to him and was basically like, like, oh, hey, we want that. And part of it was just, we wanted it because we didn't want anybody next to us, and because we were like, we don't know what kind of business is going to open up. And, and so we were like, and it was, he just lumped it into our lease. So we didn't even have to like get a new lease. He just was like, oh, okay, we'll just add this on top of your already existing, this much more a month. And so we went over there and we cleared the space out and turned it into just one big open room, and it became a painting studio. And we were originally going to try to set up a little kitchen for our son because he likes to cook, and kind of like, evolve it into a pop-up restaurant gallery. Kind of we had this like idea going for a while. And then, and so I just started painting. I just started painting and painting. She brought home some art books one day when her and Sailor went out like book hunting to find recipe books, because he loved finding new recipes. So they went to the thrift stores and were like, hey, let's see what kind of recipe books are out there. So she came home and was like, oh, I brought these art books home. And one of them was Jackson Pollock. And it was basically kind of it was a short book and, an easy read.
Yep.
And so reading books is always like a super challenge for me. I have attention deficit. So I get the book goes down, and it may sit there for months before I pick it back up again. I don't have a problem like remembering what the book's about.
Yeah.
I pick it back up later, but I just keep in my momentum. I have to kind of like build a routine, to do it. And I've learned that about myself, but so we were going out of town. So I was like, oh, I'm gonna take this book with me. So I actually read the book the whole week we were out of town, finished it, and then was kind of just like really inspired on like, a lot of it was he described how he painted, like how he kind of like wanted to veer away from anything traditional as a painter, and basically paint like, okay, everybody's using brushes, I'm not going to use that. Everybody's putting their stuff on an easel, I'm not going to use an easel. So he went in a different direction. So I was like, I'm going to go that way. Yeah. And it was just kind of like me picking a trajectory, because I kind of started painting, but I didn't really know what I wanted to paint, because I had been doing tattoos for so long that it was like everything kind of kept falling back into that lane of like, oh, now it's a tattoo again. Now it's a tattoo again. And I was kind of like, oh, okay. So I had to like
break the habit.
Yeah. Muscle memory, my mind going that direction of designing. And so I was like, oh, I'm gonna do some abstract. I always loved abstract work when I was younger. I liked doing it, but didn't really know where I could take it.
Yeah.
So I was like, I was gonna do it. So I just went out, just bought some. Terry's like, let's just go buy you some canvas. So I was like picking out like 2 or 3,
Yeah.
and she's like, no, get all of these, and I'm like, oh, okay, and she's like, oh, yeah, go ahead and spend that on yourself.
Yeah.
So
Again, the driving force.
yeah, exactly. Invest in yourself. So yeah, you deserve it.
Yeah.
Buy them. So I bought like a dozen or so, or maybe I think it was maybe more, canvases, and then I just started painting. And then I just started like, just sharing some like read to my story, my personal
Yeah.
like profile, because I had the shop and I always just use that with my
Yeah.
tattoos. I never started my own tattoo page for myself.
Mhm.
I just operated off the shop name. And so I just kind of like started throwing paintings on there, and, and then was like, God, use this maybe just to, show people,
Yeah.
just have fun with it. Just wasn't like I didn't even know where I was going to go with it. And then one of my clients reached out one day and was like, how much is that one? And I was like, oh, wow. I didn't even consider it for sale, at the time, but I was like, wow, okay. So something appealed to somebody else. And when I was younger and I would do paintings and I had friends that liked them, they, oh my God, that's so cool. I usually just gave them, because I was like, didn't see a value in it yet, which was me giving myself shortcomings, and then so I just, well, you can just have it then. And then so he came over, like, I was like, well, you can come by the studio one day. And I had like, I think like a dozen pieces that I had done abstract wise. And he was like, he walked around for like about 30 minutes and was, asking me some questions about stuff. What's up with that one? How, how did you inspire on that one? And, what gives you kind of your direction? And at that moment, I was just kind of like, I had taken all this like defined things that I was doing with tattooing. Like, I was really fine tuning everything. It's structure. It has to be. And I was like, okay, I want to break this down to just color and texture. And then that's all I wanted to think about. So that I gave myself a limited window to work in, and then just pick a direction and see where it takes me. And then so that was where I just started exploring, like what colors am I going to use in this painting? And then like, okay, what am I going to use to create the texture? And I was trying to find anything that wasn't an art tool. So I like literally picking up trash and using trash to like, throw, I'm going to throw this away. Actually, before I throw this away, this could do this. I wonder if I did this with it, and then learning things, kind of just exploring with, there was, no obligation in the direction I was going. And when I tattoo, I have an obligation. I have a client that's sitting down. They're giving me their idea. They might even give me free form of like, just draw something, maybe just draw something Japanese, because I know you like doing that stuff, that style. And then they're still giving me an open-ended direction, but I have an obligation to still have something they want to wear. So I got to kind of still hit that. And so when I started painting, I didn't have that obligation. And so in a way, it like freed my mind up and opened it up, and actually kind of helped my tattooing too. Gave me like a feeling of, more creative ability. Like there was another window that opened up.
Yeah.
Like, oh, here's some more opportunity. I could apply to that because I'm doing this.
Did you feel that it revitalized you? Do you feel like it was like, oh shit, like new, gave you a new outlook or breathed like some new energy into you?
Oh, it did. 100%. Yeah. 100%. It totally revitalized.
That's awesome.
Like literally like, like just like, okay, I just would sit down and I would like, it was one of the moments in my life where my mind was quiet. I was only this in front of me is
nice.
What I was really worrying on.
Yeah.
And I wasn't worrying about anything. I was just in the moment, and then I kind of started like, where is this coming from? What is it? And I told Terry one day, I said, it's like there's this energy in me. And I said, and then when I put it on this canvas, I go, that's what it looks like.
Yeah.
I go, that's the only way I can describe like what I'm doing is I'm releasing an energy that I have that's there, and I didn't know what to do with it.
Shit.
And so now I'm just like putting it on something.
Yeah.
And then in a way, it's like, and then there's a moment where you look at it and you're like, oh, wow, that's perfect.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm not touching it anymore. And I've even had times where I've like been painting and doing something, and Terry would have like showed up at the studio, stop by and tell me something. And then she'll be like, oh my God, I love that one. you're not doing anything else to it, are you? And I'm like, I don't know. I was kind of just staring at it and thinking. She goes, no, you shouldn't. That's perfect. And I'm like, oh, okay. So it actually, like, painting and then having her come and interject, it gave me another perspective to look at it, to not look at it as, because sometimes I would get caught up in the process because I was releasing this energy that I had.
Yeah.
And so I would get caught up and I would just continue to keep doing something to the painting. And then sometimes it was like a painting over the top of another painting, over the top of another, over the top, and then I might bury something 3D because what the whole process that's happening at the moment, I'm enjoying.
Yeah.
And then, so that I did those, and a friend of mine who's a photographer was like, called me up one day, hey, I want to come shoot you in your studio. And I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
And I was like, that sounds fun. He's a rad photographer and like 30 years, plus of experience, amazing guy. And he's in town, Sean. And he basically was like, hey, I want to do this. And I want to actually have some footage that I shot you, in your beginning, is what he kind of saw. So then he took some pictures of me that day and then showed a friend of his that, and he basically was like, who's that guy? He goes, oh, it's my friend. He just started painting, got serious about painting again. He was like, and he goes, so these are some of his, new pieces. And he's like, I want to buy one. And so just another one just like happened before I even like really was like, trying to take it. Once again, I started it in the direction of just like, I wanted to do it and was like, okay, I'm going to take this somewhere. And then, so he called and, picked one out after some photos that I'd sent him. Well, these are all available. And picked one out, framed it up. And, Sean actually delivered it for me because he was going over to the guy's house the next day. So he came by, picked it up, delivered it for me. So I was kind of like, wow, that's cool. They're like, somebody else. So it's cool. Like when I create something that I don't have an obligation or direction, I create it and then somebody else sees an attachment in it. It's really neat to see that, like, they want to take that home and they want to put it in their house.
Yeah.
That's their, I guess, everybody's home is their sanctuary. So they want to make that a part of their day-to-day life.
Yeah.
And that's really neat, as well as somebody wearing, an image I create, for the rest of their life. So I did that. And then it just kind of evolved and started gaining momentum. Then we had our shop, the building sold that we basically were renting, and they didn't sell it to us. And so we ended up like, okay, well, we got to find a place.
Yeah.
Well, now I had this building that was like almost 900 square feet that was full of painting stuff and materials and canvas and, and Terry was like, okay, well, you need a studio still. And so she's like, we are going to move into the living room and you're going to use the bedroom as your studio. Until she goes, this is just, well, this is what you're going to do.
Yep.
We'll down the road, we will figure out the next step. And so bought a Murphy bed that day. And she was moved right into the living room. So we'd been sleeping in the living room for like a year plus now. And then our bedroom became a painting studio. And then while we were still in the old building, our son got into it too.
Nice.
He was really intrigued by watching me one day and was like, I want to do one. So we said, go ahead, go ahead.
Yeah.
So set him up, put some colors out in front of him, put a couple of the, tools that I had made and used. And here you go, and then showed it, well, you could do this and this gives you this texture. And then he's like, okay. So we just let him go to town and he ended up painting something. He sold a piece.
No way.
Yeah. One of our friends, Terry, had shared it and posted it, and one of our friends was like, how much is that? And Terry's like, well, I already claimed that one, but if you want, he'll do one for you. And they commissioned him.
No way.
Yeah, for a piece. And so now we had this building that we didn't have anymore. But we both she's like, you guys still need your space to paint. So we were kind of scheduling our time of like, oh, I got to get this done. And then we'd be able to, sometimes only one of us could be in there in a moment, depending on what we were working on.
Yeah.
And then we had a friend of mine in California, Brady Wilmot. He's a painter as well. And he actually went to school for painting. He does surrealist
Yeah.
stuff, really like skilled painter, like oil painter. And he got invited to go out to Miami and go to Art Week, Art Basel down there. And so we had been talking about going, Terry and I, for years, like, oh, well, yeah, we want to go down there. Another friend of ours was going down there regularly and painting and doing Art Week. And so we were like, okay, well, two of our friends are there this year. We need to go down and see Justin Brady. And so we go down there and then we go to this fair that my friend Brady's at. And then, so I started following that page on Instagram. And then they did an open call one day. It was like open call submissions to, you want to get in next year. And I was like, yeah, well, I'll give it a go. So I just like pulled 6 photos of things because they asked for 6 pieces. I sent in, and I had already like built myself a website at that moment. And then was like kind of copy pasted my mission statement, threw it on there, and then threw my pieces out there. A week later, I got an acceptance letter,
nice,
to get in the fair. And Terry didn't when I did. No, I did it. I was like opening up my emails. I was like, oh my God, I got in the Spectrum. And she's like, what? And I said, yeah, I just submitted. They did open call. So I just submitted. I didn't know what was going to happen. I was like, why not? Why not give it a try?
Yeah.
And so then, so I get like, follow up with the email. She's like, oh my God, that's amazing. You got to do this. And she was telling me like the year prior, like, you're going to be down here, you're going to have a booth in this one. And I was all kind of like, oh, okay, that's fast. Like, maybe not thinking that I was, the trajectory, but she's, my biggest believer.
Yeah.
Always like I say, pushing into the right direction. And so she's like, no, we're gonna figure out how to get you in here next year. So then called up, they told me that the booth, it was, pretty hefty investment for myself. So she's like, I was like, oh, okay, it's this much. And she's like, okay, book it. And I was like, oh, really? And she's like, yeah, get it now.
Yeah.
While there's a booth left. And so ended up, booking. And then she's like, get the bigger one. You want to make a presence. And so the guy that I was talking to ended up having like a booth actually made for me because they didn't have any of the size left that I wanted.
Oh, wow.
And so he goes, well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to take these 2 small ones and I'm just going to turn them into one big one. And he goes, I think that's a great spot for you. And so in the section of the fair, I ended up actually having like a 20 by 4 foot booth.
Oh, wow.
In a section that was all 4 by 10s. And so I was actually like kind of stood out a little bit. I was like, oh, this is cool. And I was right in front of an open area. So I wasn't in an aisle as much as I was like in front of me. There wasn't anything else going on except for like a bar. And
that's perfect.
Yeah. So it was nice. Yeah. So from there, I ended up, we went down there and did that. And then, rented the trailer, loaded up, giant pieces. Terry's like, oh, you need to do this size piece and this and that. I had some stuff already. And she's like, okay, so we were like game planning, like, kind of curating with her. She was helping me curate an idea, like, okay, what are you going to present yourself? You have your abstract expressionist stuff and you have these cubist inspired faces that you draw.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was working out of the house one day was when I started drawing these faces that originated from me when I was in like middle school.
Oh, wow.
I used to draw like cubist faces on my folders and things constantly. And once again, that was something I didn't know that I could do anything with it. No one had ever
all these talents.
No one had ever like seen anything I did and like, hey, you could do something with that, or
seen the potential.
No one I was around was maybe saw those directions either.
Yeah.
And so then we decided like, okay, let's go on this cubist. I really enjoy doing this. And so let's take this. There was more so that there was already plenty of abstract artists at this fair. So we're like, okay, let's stand out.
Yep.
So I have these 2 lanes that I drive in, and so let's take this one down there. And so that's what we did. And I put together like a whole series of like, this is all going to go with me to Miami,
Hell yeah.
and went down there, had a rad showing, rad reception, like amazing. I had made these little 8x8s, and I had like 6 of those. I sold all those. They were like a real, easy collector piece for someone that just maybe wants to kind of start collecting art. Like, oh, that's really rad, and sold all those. I sold one of my 3 foot by 3 foot pieces. And then I had one of my paintings I literally, I think, was photographed at least 200 or more times. I got a couple like do a full on photo shoot in front of it. They were like there about 10 minutes, like, and they had that entourage with them.
Oh, wow.
Terry and I are like, she's like, I don't know who that guy is, but he's somebody, because you can tell he's used to having his photograph taken.
Yeah.
The way he was,
each photo is $25.
So yeah. So it escalated from there. I met, so I was standing at my booth when I was talking to somebody, and then I turned around and I saw this, gentleman looking at one of my paintings, and he was really close to it, even looking at my frame that I had made. And then, so I just started talking to him, and then it turns out he's a gallery owner in New York. And he's the one that, he basically said, he told me he wanted to start working with me.
Yeah.
So that opened up that door. And just like, it was about a month ago, I drove, my first 3 pieces.
What was that like? Because that was huge. That was for anybody that's in the local area that's following Gerry. I think all of us had the same thought. We're all cheering and championing on somebody that's like, you played a huge role to so many soft professionals, regular Air Force, regular Army, everybody here that's in the veteran and military community, like that has gone through your doors, that follows you. I can honestly tell you, everybody's seen those posts and it's like, fuck yeah, that's our guy.
Yeah. Thank you. That's it was very surreal.
Yeah.
Like, and amazing. And I've had a couple of people like, your friend Kyle has said that too. Like, he's reached out to me like, oh yes, go.
Yeah, dude.
Like everyone else is seeing your potential.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a real surreal moment. He's like, I want, 8 foot by 3 foot pieces. Can you do a series of 3? He's like, I want to be able to sell them individually or as a set.
Mm-hmm.
And he was kind of like, fine tuning, like, which I don't know if, because I've always worked with people in tattooing of like, what is it you're looking for?
Yeah.
And I know, and I find what I can do and deliver in that direction. So I didn't feel weird at all for the gallery person to be like, this is what I really want to sell. And I'd be like, okay, I can do that. So I went and, and he wasn't giving me direction on like what it is to create. He just, I like your cubist stuff. So this is what I want to sell of yours, and wanted to be my representative. So, so I had like these 8 foot by 3 foot paintings. Was like, first it was okay, we're going to rent a trailer to get it up there. We looked at shipping. It's like, wow, I can't afford that. It's like, I'm not gonna, even after they sell, I won't make anything. And so Terry was like, why don't you just drive them?
Yeah.
She goes, we don't need to go. I'm working. Sailor's working. So she goes, just drive them. Just drive up there, drop them, and turn around and head home. And so I was like, okay. So I packed him inside our Ford Flex, which is, there's 8 feet of space in there, but it comes into the front. The front seat. And so
I'm visualizing that right now.
And so I was like, okay, had they been 6 foot, would have been no issue. They would have fit right behind the back seat and been fine. But that 8 foot perimeter was like, okay. So I went in there and I measured the car out one day, and I'm like, 8 feet would fit in here. I can get it in here. I just need to build up something. And I was going to build a rack, originally for them to slide into in the car. Well, like I was spend so much time like painting because I had a deadline. I was like, I don't have time to build a rack. So kind of makeshifted one with some cushions and padding. But after I got them in there, then I had to take all the headrests off the car, all the seats, they came down, all the headrests came off. then after I got him in there, I like, had my son like, okay, I want you to just lift him up, hold him right here. And then I shimmed out underneath them on the seats so that they were high enough. So they literally weren't like right on my shoulder, so I could actually still turn to the right and see the rearview mirror. And then, I was like, then Terry looks at it the next day, she's laughing. She's like, well, you're going to do it, and so then I hopped in the car and took off. I ended up driving and I was probably just on sheer energy of amp.
Yeah.
That I was like taking some stuff to New York. So I, was like, because I feel like maybe that's like it's like an ultimate dream of any art.
Yeah.
That's a hub of the world for art. And so I'm going to be represented there and be able to show my work there.
Yeah.
So I literally drove all the way 4 hours shy of Manhattan, straight through, and I stopped because I had family in Maryland.
Oh, nice.
So I was like, okay, maybe I'll just stop there. Terry's like, yeah, just stop there, take a nap.
Yeah.
I was like, that sounds, and then just get up. And then I could time myself to come into the city at the right time. And then, so I just literally drove straight there. I slept at his house for 4 hours, got back up.
Yep.
Got in the car, drove straight in, and then dropped him off. And, it was great experience.
Yeah.
It was once again, it was surreal, speechless.
Yeah.
While it was happening, okay, this is cool.
Yeah. It's a huge win. That's something that we tell ourselves that, okay, once you get to a certain age or a certain period in your life, you're not going to have these big wins. That's not true. That's not fucking true.
No,
you can have these wins throughout your life. You just have to be committed to what you're passionate about. You have to be committed to something.
Yeah.
If you're just flying out there in the ether, just bouncing from one thing to another and not feeling passion or that drive to create something, to do something, it's going to be hard. It's going to be difficult. It's going to be slightly impossible at times. But that's where the payoff comes from. That's where you will have the payoff. If you're just engaging with just everyday comforts, everyday lifestyle, scrolling through your phone, playing a video game nonstop, you're never going to get those moments where holy shit, I made it.
Yeah.
I did it. Your success is inspiration to all of us. Even if you're not an artist, even if you never wanted to pick something up, if you're just working a job in the hopes of getting that promotion to go on to do something else, this is a tale of inspiration for you. Just keep moving forward in whatever you're striving for. You can't live a life and just say that you're not going to have these successes. That's not a life worth living. You got to aim towards something.
Yeah.
There's got to be something you want. Figure what that is. Figure it out. I'm almost 40 and I'm just now figuring out what those goals are. And that's okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it is. And and it's that thing you hear many people, say it over and over, when they're public speaking or whatever, if you're still breathing, there's still an opportunity for you to do what you want to do or to do anything that you want to do.
Yeah.
So that was, just going in that direction, taking off. Then after that one, I got back into town, and there's a place in Pensacola called the Brent Lofts,
mm-hmm.
and it's a new development there. Beautiful building. It's over 100 years old that they renovated into a loft apartments. They have, I think, one floor is short-term rentals, and then the other floors are full-time residents. And I had emailed them pre-construction,
mm-hmm.
because I was thinking, ways there's not an abundance of galleries in our area.
Yeah, no.
So there's, it's not I had, open, I can go and mingle. My friend does that all the time in San Diego area because he can drive to LA, San Diego, and he's able to exist in that world and meet people, face to face.
Yep.
So here it's not that much. So I was thinking what are directions I can
mm-hmm.
show my work. So I emailed this place and was like, hey, I think that my work would work well with your brand. And I think we could, help cross promote each other. And so I'd love to talk to you about putting work in your in your maybe your lofts as well as in your gallery, lobby space. Well, then they opened up, and then they had an artist in there, like showing their work, and I was like, oh wow, that's like what I was like trying to present them.
Did you steal my idea?
Yeah, and so I reached back out to him. Hey, I'd love to get involved.
Yeah.
And so then the guy who was his assistant called me and was like, hey, are you available to take a phone call right now? The director wants to talk to you about putting your art. We want to have your art in the building. I was like, oh, okay, thank you. And it turned out I had actually already missed an email from them.
Oh,
It went straight to my junk, and I didn't see it. And so they had already like tried to get in touch with me, like 2-3 weeks prior to that. So I looked like the guy that wasn't responding, and
he's playing hard to get.
Yeah. And so I'm talking to the guy, and then we went over and met him, and I told him about my son painting as well, and he's like, oh, well, maybe he goes, I'd be interested in having you and your son do like a group show with the two of you. He says, and he really wants it to be a space where just like 1 or 2 artists show. He's like, I don't want the whole thing to be a group show constantly. He goes, I'm trying to create where I'm showcasing somebody.
Yeah.
And so we went and talked to him. Well, it turned out the first artist that was there was someone that he knew from like 30 years plus of his life. Who was a painter. And so he basically, when the place was finally open, he goes, I just called my friend because I knew he had a bunch of paintings and I knew we could put it together real quick. And he goes, and then I still had your email. So I was like, I'm going to reach out to that guy. and so I was like, and he was talking about how he wanted to do something with the space. And that was his kind of idea. So when he saw my email, he was kind of like, oh, this is cool that somebody else saw this as well. And so we're getting ready. Sailor and I are doing like 40 pieces or more, like in this space. The downstairs lobby is probably about 1,200, maybe more square feet of space.
Holy
and then
cow.
It goes up 4 floors, and each floor is going to be like at least, like 4 to 5 pieces on each floor going up. And then it's going to be up for 4 months. And we're going to have gallery night in Pensacola goes on Palafox.
Yep.
Third Friday of every month. And so we'll be down there manning it during gallery nights.
Heck yeah.
Having the door open to kind of a public space. Because it's set as more of a private space. There's certain times of the week that the doors are open to the public.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's also the short-term renters that come through there. And then so we're going to try to put together some events like reception night.
Yeah.
Or multiple receptions.
That's freaking awesome.
But that opened up, that opportunity, opened up for me while I was in Miami. I had a lady in Long Island give me her card and was like, I love, your whole brand here. I think that, I run she's like a design firm,
mm-hmm.
and she does kind of curates people's business spaces, their homes, she'll be like, okay, this is, I think you should probably collect from this artist. And she recommends artists for them to collect from, and then gets the work, framed if needed, or that's another service that her company does. So I reached out to her, and that's kind of the beginning of the relationship, trying to, how do I get you my work? How do you show it? And so that's another avenue. Had a gentleman out of Texas who's originally from Mexico City, who reached out to me, and I just signed a contract with him for him to be my representative.
No shit.
In Texas. And
nice.
he's in the process of, in the next year or so, actually opening up his own gallery in the Houston area.
Nice.
But right now he's doing pop-up events.
Mm-hmm.
And so while he's building his relationships in the area.
Heck yeah.
So that was another avenue that, so the momentum happened really quickly after Miami of some opportunities.
Yeah.
So, and it's real exciting to do, because once again, it started out as something I dove into because I wanted to do it. And my wife, pushed me into it.
You got to take that leap.
You got to take the leap. You got to, do it, so we did.
Yeah, that's the lesson for today. If you're out there and you're creating or doing something that you're passionate about and you love, and you're scared about putting it out there in the world, take the leap. be willing to put it out there. Yeah, you're going to be vulnerable. You're going to be subject to somebody else's opinion on it. But you never know. It could be the thing that kicks off your next great adventure.
Very well could.
You're never going to get to that end point unless you're willing to be vulnerable. Gerry, dude.
That is true. Yeah.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for being the amazing person you are, because you've not only helped us become a little bit cooler with awesome tattoos, but you've helped so many of us get that outside perspective and just understand that, like, oh man, like, God, like I need to be more well-rounded. I need to be able to be more like Gerry and live a life that's just not being honed in and being in a box. So,
thank you.
From all of us.
Thank you that you want to aspire to be me. That's really humbling to hear.
So before,
but in the sense of like you talking about like wanting to, take that leap.
Yeah.
It's important. Like I think of it when I'm painting is that these are just things that I feel that I want to create, and it's up to the world to decide if they like it.
Yeah.
But I'm not trying to convince them. I just am doing it because I'm passionate about creating it.
Yeah.
And that part is like the enjoyment, and I get fulfillment out of it. And then when it goes further, it's, even a, more elevated, sensation.
It's cool, but it's cool that I'm doing it.
Yeah, exactly.
Dude, thank you so much for being here, man. I really appreciate it. Before we close off, what's the name of your website? Where can we look at your art? And if you're looking for a tattoo in Northwest Florida, where can people go?
Yeah. All right. Well, the tattoo shop, sailawaytattoo.com. And you can type that in as one word on Instagram as well, Sail Away Tattoo, and it'll take you to our profile page. You can DM from there. I usually shoot my cell phone out to people after I start DMing them, because I see cell phones the fastest.
Yeah.
The text I see the fastest, and I can respond and see on top of those. My art website is gerardfrank.art, and that's actually my Instagram handle as well.
Nice.
So I made them the exact same. So that you can
make it simple.
Yeah. And from the shop Instagram also has a link to my art page. I have that on there as well. And then my business card now actually has nothing to do with tattoos at all. And when I hand it to people, I'm like, and I'm talking to them about tattoos.
Yeah.
At the time, I'm like, oh, here's my card. And I'm like, that's just my painting. That's my painting stuff. I said, but that's how you can reach me.
Yeah.
And then a lot of them I find when they get in that, like, say if they're followers, become a follower on Instagram. It's weird that that's a thing in my life, followers, and, from that generation where that was, but it's, I find that they'll like go on and they'll follow the shop, and then they start following my paintings as well, because both realms interest them. They're, and then I've had some people now that come in to get work from me tattoo wise that are like, oh yeah, next year I'm getting a painting from you, or I'm buying a house next year, and as soon as I buy the house, I'm actually going to collect a piece of your work as well. That they want that that realm, and I go,
heck
yeah, and that has a lot to go with what you describe about you saying me as a person.
Yeah,
is that they just want that piece of like this whole story that went along with.
Exactly.
You did
it by design. You did a damn good job.
Thank you. Yeah. And that's that I'm trying to take like the brand as a painter. I call myself my real name's Gerard, name. So I'll always go by Gerry. So I went Gerard Frank became my first and middle name. Yeah. Became my painting brand.
Yeah.
So that's why gerardfrank.art.
Yeah. You were destined with a name like that. You were destined to be an artist and a successful painter.
Well, thank you.
Well, thank you all for being here today. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll catch you all next time. Till then, take care.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, man. That was easy.
Yeah.
Just got to make sure we recorded everything.
That your camera didn't die along.
If you like what we're doing and you're enjoying the show, don't forget to share us, like us, subscribe, and head on over to our Patreon where you can be part of our community and get access to all of our episodes as soon as they drop. And remember, we get through this together. Take care.